it's good to see you all. I think I might just get started with the intro because other people can join as we get going. So, kia ora koto, ko Stephen toku ingoa, no o tatahi au. It's great to see you all. It's always fun to see who's joining, the faces popping into the screen. Today, we've got several people who have some sector updates, which is wonderful because I think part of the main reasons for these calls is to hear what's going on that we may not know about. So it's really great. There's a few of you who've got some updates for us. We're going to start with some information from IRD, and Stewart and Rata are here from IRD, so they're going to outline a bit about the small business loan scheme, and in particular looking at the not-for-profit context. And I know they're quite keen to hear your questions, and that will help them as well in refining explanations for charities and not-for-profits and others. So that will be really good. But as well, Louise from Ākina Foundation is on the call, and she said that she's willing to share about a report that they've just released, which is really mapping the future in terms of an impact economy and what that shape that might be. As well as that, Sue from Philanthropy New Zealand said that she had an update on a survey that they're running with a number of different organizations. So we're going to hear from her as well. And then finally, Sarah Doherty had some thoughts and some information about something that she's been involved in. So I think if it's okay, Stuart, we might just get straight into it. And we're really excited to hear from IRD, from what you guys have been doing, what you're working on. Maybe before we dive into the detail of the small business loan scheme, if you could just give us an update on what you're seeing and conversations you've been having, and then we can go from there. So I'll just hand it over to you.
Thanks. I better check to make sure. Rata, are you on the call? I'm just trying to make sure that Rata is actually
Stuart,
on board.
yes, I am on the call.
Perfect. Just general comments then. So as most of you know, I'm on policy, so we're working with the government on initiatives as a result of COVID-19. It's kept us crazily busy. I can't even begin to describe how busy that is. I think JB Ware put out a report this week which talked about the not-for-profit sector and the various changes that would benefit the sector. So I thought that was quite a good report. I think the feedback I've had, and I know I think I got about a dozen responses from different umbrella groups about this scheme for the business loans, is that it's not the most popular solution for the not-for-profit sector. Obviously, loans have to be paid back; they're not as good as grants. We're reporting to the Minister of Finance and Revenue probably next week on the scheme. And whether it should be extended or not. It's got a 1-month window. So we're looking at the data. We're really interested in feedback to know why people aren't using it. We're actually interested to know, if you are using it, do you have a good news story that's worthwhile sharing? Or if we did extend it, is there a key barrier in the current law that would actually want to change, so that actually if we remove that barrier, you'd find the scheme more palatable? But by and large, we've had really consistent feedback that schemes that involve loans are obviously not as appealing as grants or things like the wage subsidy. So that's held us back here. I've got numbers and statistics behind the scheme, but I think it's better that Rata really talks through the scheme. Otherwise, generally, I've just found with COVID-19 that it is really good having links with sectors. And we talk to the CANS, Chartered Accountants, the Law Society. We talk to the Corporate Taxpayer Group every week about what they're seeing across the country with COVID-19, what thoughts they have on the tax system, and what should be, could potentially be changed, what barriers there are. So sometimes I sit at those meetings and I think there are other voices that need to be heard, including the voice of the not-for-profit sector. So really thinking about how we include that voice into our policy thinking, and not just tax, obviously. I mean, this applies to MB and DI and other areas. Thinking about how that voice can be heard is something I think we should all give some thought to. That's my broad overview. Hopefully that was interesting.
Yeah, that's great.
And I'll answer questions at the end as well. That's always fine.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. That's a good intro. And then Rata, I've made you a co-host. So if you, I know you had some slides. If you want to share them, I think you can share your screen.
Well, I'll try and do that now. So share screen. Do that. So can you see the presentation?
Yep, that looks good. Yep.
Okay, cool. And if I just from the beginning. Right, okay. So yeah, when we introduced the scheme on the 12th of May, it was really interesting. We actually had people even applying or trying to apply for the scheme on the Monday instead of the Tuesday when it was actually opening. And on Tuesday we had, before 8 o'clock in the morning, we had about 2,000 applications, you know, for this scheme itself. So there was actually quite a lot of interest in it. What we did was we ran a couple of webinars, and this is one of the reasons why we're keen to share some information with you. We ran some webinars through the Canterbury Chamber of Commerce and also the Wellington Chamber of Commerce, and to talk through the scheme. And there were a lot of questions about the scheme, and we were seeing some questions also from not-for-profits that we were actually quite keen to cover off in a more broader sense, and again, hence the reason why we've come here. But it was a general theme across most businesses that were wanting to know more about this particular scheme. So my name, Rata Kamau, ko Rata Kamau tuku ingoa. I'm from Ngāti Kahungunu, no Herotanga Aho, so I'm from Hastings in the Hawke's Bay region, and I'm an account manager primarily for business transformation. So some of you possibly would have received some emails from me or communication from me in relation to our transformation program. But as the COVID-19 event occurred, because of my engagement with a number of stakeholders across a number of industries, I was pulled in to support the wider inland revenues in response to COVID-19, and hence the reason why I'm talking to you about the small business cash flow scheme. So if I get into it, the small business cash flow scheme, it was introduced to support small and medium businesses, predominantly small and micro, organisations struggling with the loss of revenue as a result of COVID-19. And what was interesting to also highlight here, that it's available for those who are sole traders as well as SMEs and other organisations such as charities and not-for-profit entities. So for a business to be eligible for the cash flow scheme, your business or organisation must be viable, and you must have a plan to ensure that it remains viable. And, you know, there is information on our website to, you know, work through what viable actually means. For employers, your business or organisation to be eligible for the scheme, you would have either had to have received the wage subsidy for 50 full-time equivalent employees or less, or if you didn't apply for the wage subsidy but are eligible and have 50 full-time equivalent employees or less, you could still apply for the scheme as well. Some of the questions that we came out to, the first one was, that's quite a big number. How is that made up? And if you look at the wage subsidy for the full-time equivalent, it's approximately 7,029 or something on those sort of figures. Times that by 50, and then you just get this number here. One of the questions that typically gets raised though is, well, you know, I have a lot of part-time employees, you know, or 0.2 of an FTE. You know, how does that work? Is it 50 people or is it 50 full-time equivalents? And it's full-time equivalents. So that number could be higher if you have, you know, seasonal workers or part-time workers. So, you know, if you, for example, if they had 0.5 in an FTE, I mean, that could be 100 employees, you know, under, or up to 100 employees under this scheme. So there's more information around what defines a part-time employee versus a full-time employee. In essence, it's 20 working hours a week, as similar to the wage subsidy would be, or less is considered a part-time employee, and then it's 40 hours for a full-time employee. There's more information on our website around what's required or to be eligible for the scheme, and I really would encourage people to access that information. It's quite detailed in there, and it should support a lot of people to understand further. So how do you apply? So it opened up on the 12th of May. It goes for a month, or it goes till the 12th of June 2020. And you do need to register for a MyIR account because the application process is through MyIR. So when you go into MyIR and you look at the top right side of the screen, you'll see the options I want to. And then under there, you'll be able to see I want to, and then apply for a loan. So that's where you would start the process to apply for the scheme. You do need some information, and I've listed them here. Things like, for example, the New Zealand business number. There were a lot of questions raised about why do I need one. Really, it just makes that process a lot easier for us to validate who you were and actually to work with MB as well, just to make sure that we've got the right person applying for the loan. You also need a valid New Zealand bank account. Now, if you're using MyIR, I mean, there's an option there to highlight what bank accounts you want to use for your MyIR account, but it has to be a valid New Zealand bank account. You need to confirm that you're experiencing a 30% decline in actual or predicted revenue. You need to confirm that your business organisation existed before the 1st of April and also it's viable. And you need to make sure and confirm that the purpose of the loan is to pay for core operating costs. Now, those core operating costs can be things such as rent, supply payments, insurance. One of the questions that we're getting quite a lot from is, well, can I use it to pay tax debt? Well, the answer to that is no, you can't do that. You know, well, can I use it to pay another loan that I may have? Well, the answer to that is no, you can't. And you got to remember what the core intent or the fundamental intent of the scheme is to support businesses through this period, but it's to pay for core operating costs. And while we may consider tax debt, you know, a primary concern or a thing to deal with, in the context of operating costs, we're really talking about rent, utilities, you know, supplier payments and insurance. You need to confirm that the loan will not be passed through to shareholders or owners. The last thing we want is, for argument's sake, that money going towards dividend payments, because that's not the intent of what the scheme is about. You need to confirm that you're the appropriate authority to apply for the loan. This ties into the conversation we had with some of these webinars around, you know, well, why can't a tax agent or a intermediary apply for the loan on my behalf? Now, I know that there was conversations about this, but fundamentally it came down to, we wanted to make sure that the person who would be accountable for managing the repayment of the loan was the person that was applying for the loan. So there was an onus to make sure that, you know, you had a duty of care in relation to managing that loan moving forward. So we wanted to make sure that, you know, the person that's applying has the appropriate authority to do so. And once you've applied for the loan, you'll get a loan agreement, of which we're asking people to agree to that loan agreement. What's important to know, and there's a lot of questions, and I see that some of the questions did come up with a lot of not-for-profits as well, was around, well, you know, what does that mean in terms of, you know, liability? You know, who will be liable for it? You know, in terms of other partners. What about my partners? You know, would that be liable? You know, she be liable for the loan? Well, the thing with it is that Inland Revenue doesn't provide financial advice. So it's really important to, when you're going through thinking about whether you're going to apply for the scheme or not, is to seek financial advice from a tax advisor or your accountant or a financial advisor to really understand whether this scheme and this loan suits you, because it may not. And we're certainly not promoting the scheme so that everybody can apply for it, but if it meets your circumstances and needs and you have the ability to pay this loan back and you're comfortable about your forward projections and your revenue, do you think that it's appropriate for you? Work with your financial advisor, your tax professional, to understand and work through those and your risk profile to understand whether it's right for you or not. And if it is, then we would suggest applying for the scheme. But you really need to put some time and thought on it. And I know a lot of people are really suffering at the moment, and there's a lot of what I would loosely describe desperation to ensure their business survives. But they need to do the due diligence and the due care to make sure that what they're entering into is something that they can viably enter into moving forward. And that's one of the strongest messages that we can send out to organisations. So what happens after you apply for the loan? Well, if you're eligible, you'll receive a loan contract letter through MyIR. Now, in most cases, you'll receive it within 5 working days. That should be worst case scenario. In the main, we hope to have it out to you within a couple of days. But what we'll do is we'll certainly commit to making sure that you receive it within 5 working days. So expect it sooner, but it could be up to 5 working days. Repayments can begin straight away. So for example, if you apply for the loan and then you get into a situation where, you know what, I can actually make repayments and I'm comfortable to do that, then there's nothing to actually stop you from doing that. So in the first year, it actually isn't required to make any sort of repayments, but after that, you will be expected to make payments. So, think about, whether you can make repayments or not, and if you want to make repayments, you can do so. Another question that or a lot of questions that we get around, the application, if it's declined. So what we're saying is to make sure that you check the eligibility criteria on the website. We do get a few that are coming through, and it's really comes down to eligibility around certain aspects. So, but what we will do is that one of our staff will get in touch with you to work through your application if it's been declined, just to make sure that we've got all the right information available. Now, when you do the application itself, it's a relatively simple process. We do have a document out there to step you through it, but it is relatively simple, and there are steps that it should be easy to follow, and you actually can't move forward unless you complete the respective information. Like, for example, the New Zealand business number. So if you don't supply it, you can't get into the next step. So it's quite simple in that respect. But again, there's more information on our website pertaining to that process.
Oh, well, go ahead.
Oh, yep, sorry. So how do I repay the loan? So what I would say to that is that all Inland Revenue's usual repayment options will be available, including online banking. So you'll be able to go onto your bank, pay my tax, if that's what you want to do. You can enter into instalment plans as well with us. Loans will be subject to an annual interest rate of 3%. What people have asked is, well, will it change due to market rates? And our response back to you is it's 3% at the time of the loan, and it'll stay consistent for the period of the loan. The good thing is that if you're able to repay the loan in full in the first year, then there won't be any interest that will be charged. And then repayments are optional after the first 24 months. So I actually got it wrong, so it's not a year, it's 2 years. But after those 2 years, what will happen is it'll be a combination of the loan itself and any interest that has accrued over that period. So we'll be looking to make sure that a repayment includes both the loan itself and the interest. Yeah, so the principal and the interest. But again, more information's on our website pertaining to that. Now, I think that's my last slide, but that was what I hoped to think would be, and I'll just stop the share for it. Hopefully that's just a high level overview, and really just was kind of keen to see whether there were any questions that people may have that, you know, that me and or Stewart and I could potentially help with.
Yeah, and maybe what we can do is keep the questions at a relatively high level, because I'm keen for the call to keep moving on as well, because we've got a few other sector updates. But if anybody has a question that may be helpful for IRD from the not-for-profit charities sector, please go ahead and ask away.
Hi, this is Louise Aitken. I just want to make a comment. I think we really need to congratulate Inland Revenue for doing this and doing this so quickly. And we really see it as a response to maybe the banks not stepping up in the way that we had hoped them to do with the loans backed by the government guarantee. So all credit to Inland Revenue and the teams. We can recognise how much work has gone on in a very, very short time, and certainly the organisations that we're speaking to who have applied, you know, found the process really, really easy, and they got the money very quickly. So all credit to you guys for all the really hard work that you've done.
Cool, thank you for that. Well, just quickly then, I think there were 3 common questions that I was aware of, and maybe we could just cover those off if there are no other questions, and then you can carry on to the other presenter. The first one was, what would the loan mean for directors and their liabilities? So this is a common question that we're getting, and what we're saying is that really, we can't provide financial advice. It's something that you really have to talk to your financial advisor, your accountant, your tax agent in relation to it. What I would say is that, you know, really think of it as a commercial loan. So, you know, the responsibilities and accountabilities that you would expect when you enter into a loan, this really shouldn't be any different. Perhaps, Stewart, maybe you want to talk about commonly owned groups, and we're getting to that.
Yeah, that's a nasty one, isn't it? We're getting a lot of questions about that, not just from not-for-profits, but everyone. So we've been working on guidance, and hopefully it's going to go up on our internet site today. What this means is, and we've got a high trust environment, and we haven't really defined common owned. So we're not saying if there's 66% ownership or anything like that, then you're commonly owned. We're saying if you're the same shareholder, then obviously there's common ownership. Otherwise, a significant shareholding. What we're trying to get at here is if you own 2 companies and one has got 30 full-time equivalents and one has got 30 full-time equivalents, then you can't treat your businesses as being 2 separate businesses. You've got a common shareholder, so together you're employing 60 people and you're over the 50 FTE entitlement. So that's really what it's about. It's really just, we use this as a proxy just to make sure that we're just giving these loans to small businesses, not large businesses, which because of their structuring has actually got a whole lot of small businesses under it. So yeah, look out for that guidance. Hopefully, as I said, if it's not up today, it'll be up on our website early next week. And just while I've got the floor, just really quickly, in terms of our numbers, I'm trying to get to the bottom of how many registered charities have applied for the loan. So I want to report to the Minister on that next week. So I don't know the answer to that. I did have a look at how many incorporated societies have applied so far, around 100. So there are some, there's not that many. if you put that into perspective, we've had about 49,000 applications so far. So 100 out of 49,000 doesn't sound like too much. We've actually released about 850 million. That's how much has gone out the door. That's how many has been applied for. Sorry, that's how much has been applied for. We've released about 780 million so far. So that's how much money we've sent out in a week. So yeah, it's been a busy week. That's all I can say. The average amount of loan is about $17,000.
There's been about 45,000 applied for the loan, if I'm right, Stewart, too, right?
Yeah, we're getting updates every day. I think we are getting now about 2,600 a day. So there was a huge peak at the start. It was about 2,600 yesterday. So yeah, my numbers are about 49,000 applications so far.
And lastly, just one last question about support moving forward. So, you know, as we alluded to, the scheme is from the 12th of May through to the 12th of June. Obviously, there'll be a conversation, you know, I'd like to think, you know, at least a week before the 12th of June, to have a conversation about whether this is a scheme that will continue on or whether it's only till the 12th of June. And as always, Inland Revenue is looking at how we can support businesses, especially through this event. So, you know, we'll continue to look at whether there are other tax relief options or other support options that we can enter into that will help support. But obviously, we're guided also by the ministers.
I think Cabinet makes a decision on the 8th of June about whether to extend it.
Right.
Great. Well, thank you guys. That was really helpful. A good overview and just good to hear, again, the purpose of these calls is to hear different perspectives and just to hear from, you know, from your perspective, what are the numbers? What are you seeing? It's really helpful for all of us. So I appreciate your time coming on the call. There's probably a lot more questions we could go into, and maybe if anybody has any, feel free to email me and I can forward them on. One question in the chat was, is that presentation okay to share afterwards? Is that's okay?
Yes, it is.
Yep.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yep.
So when I send the update out to everybody on the list, I'll attach the PDF maybe. And so, yeah, one of the purposes of the call is to hear from a variety of people. So Louise, if you don't mind getting ready, I'm just keen to hear from your perspective on what you're seeing wearing the social enterprise impact enterprise hat, and tell us a little bit about the report that's just been released. That'd be great.
Yeah, thanks for that, Stephen. And thanks for sharing the link to the report in the appointment. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, so what we've been doing, and certainly I don't know if I mentioned this a couple of meetings ago, but our focus within Ākina has been really on how can we support the recovery from COVID. In the immediate response phase, we were just more of as a director, so being able to direct people to where they may be able to get help, whether it was wage subsidy, whether it was a small business loan, whether it was advice from lawyers, accountants, etc. And so we really knew that our influence wasn't necessarily helping businesses directly through the immediate cash flow issue and the issues that they had around HR and people, etc. It was more around how can we help influence and support the recovery phase, and particularly around what type of economy we all want and need as a result of COVID, recognising very clearly that the issues that existed before COVID are significant, whether they be in the social space and whether they be in the environmental space. And as somebody pointed out to me, this pandemic didn't create inequality, it shone a light on it, which is very, very very true. So we've been doing a lot of work through our government partnership on working with MB, working with DIA, working with MSD and other departments around what are opportunities for impact in particular to be supported and valued in an economy that transpires post-COVID. And as you will have seen, there has been a significantly loud voice from many, many organisations, whether they be charitable organisations, whether they be social enterprises, community groups, for-profit organisations, really supporting this voice, this very loud voice, and advising, whether it's senior officials, ministers, etc., on what is the economy that we want and deserve as a result of COVID. So we've joined that that campaign with and many of you will have probably signed letters for the organisation, open letters or direct letters to government ministers, as of course Stephen has developed. But what we also wanted to do is provide some tangible solutions on the how. So we all know we've all been asking for the what, but often organisations have struggled to understand how they might contribute to it. So we released a thought piece, a document earlier this week, which was really our thoughts around building an impact economy in Aotearoa New Zealand. And what is that? Where could organisations, regardless of what type of organisation they are, where might they be able to participate and contribute solutions that deliver positive social and environmental impact? And we know that we weren't able to cover everything. We know it was our perspective, but we wanted to really focus on 4 key areas. One was around businesses that are starting. So those organisations that may have been sparked by somebody's idea and they think this is time for them. They've got a solution that may be able to thrive in the post-COVID economy, and really help, saying, well, what's important within that? It's really important to understand the problem that you're potentially trying to solve, to work with community groups and people who experience the problem that you're trying to create a solution for, and developing that business idea and business model in line with an impact model. So what's the support available, mainly in capability and access and mentorship, etc., that will help people start, whether it's businesses, whether it's a charity with a business arm, whatever it might be, to find a solution. The other key thing is that for businesses that have been lucky to be able to get through this first part of the COVID situation, is that how can they run well? So what's the opportunity for them to think about the positive social and environmental benefit that they can contribute to the communities in which they operate, to the environment in which they participate, and what are the skills and focuses that they should be taking when they are thinking about either starting off in the reducing of the negative, but then hopefully moving into more the positive contribution. And then we've got the other 2 really big levers, which is buying well. So how can we use the power of our supply chains, particularly significant in this time where government will be stimulating particularly the infrastructure sector? How can we ensure that we get deep community and environmental benefits from that investment, and recognising that it's not only government who participates in those, there is significant supply chains which will be activated as a result of this massive stimulus that we'll be seeing. And also those businesses that have got significant supply chains, how can they identify where positive environmental and social benefit can be delivered by buying the things that they need to buy to run their businesses? So that's pretty significant, given the fact that businesses have an expenditure of about $590 billion. Well, that was last year. I don't know about this year, but so we've got a significant opportunity there. And the next part is around investing well. We have, and there's been a lot of talk about this, about how do we attract capital that helps us accelerate and invest in solutions that deliver social and environmental benefit, but also how do we activate that impact investor here within the New Zealand domestic market. So opportunities right across the spectrum, and not only for the for-profit sector. Of course, there is a significant amount of charities who participate in the economy, and so it's really about highlighting and supporting them, and so that whatever their goods or services that they're selling are valued because of the impact. So we really wanted to start that, or continue that conversation, contribute to the conversation, and hopefully what we'll see is that it starts to the conversation itself really starts to generate ideas that will be hopefully within the wave 3 recovery that we'll see led by MB and Treasury. So have a look at it. We know, and I'll make this point, is we know it's not perfect. We know that it could have improvements, and so we're very open for that and ask for that. So if there are things that you see that maybe aren't missing or that you'd like to explore more with us, please don't hesitate. This was 4 brains with an Ākina coming together, and we know that we don't represent every part of our economy, so we're really hoping that it helps trigger at least a conversation. So thank you, Stephen, again for sharing it with the team.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. It's a good summary, and I've just put the link in the chat as well if anybody hadn't seen in the invite, so you can click that to find out. And I actually think it's really relevant, just because certainly what I'm seeing is charities more and more are looking at their income streams, and they're asking hard questions as well, aren't they? And charities fundamentally are about impact. You know, you have to say what your purpose is in your governing documents, which is something that companies don't even have to do. So there's a lot of synergy with what you're talking about in terms of impact and looking at not-for-profits and charities. So yeah, I'd encourage you to have a look at it. And I know, having discussed with many of you on the call, that many charities and not-for-profits are looking at, well, how can we set up some, you know, trading part of what we do as well. So it'll be interesting to watch as we go on how that develops. Next up, Sue, do you mind sharing, Philanthropy New Zealand has a survey. If you could just outline to us, I think it's been mentioned on the calls in the past, but now you have some more concrete information. So if you could share with us, that would be great.
Kia ora koutou. I'll be really, really brief. So next week there is a survey for community organisations going into the field, and that is really specifically looking at what the impact of COVID-19 is. So you know, the purpose is to highlight the contribution of the sector using data to communicate the impact, and obviously making the data really publicly accessible for everyone to use and kind of to influence decision making, to allow advocacy, etc., etc. And also potentially, you know, to be a bit of a benchmarking tool. So this survey is a partnership between Hui, Volunteering New Zealand, Philanthropy New Zealand, which is where I'm from, and the Centre for Social Impact, who are actually doing the survey design. They sit within Foundation North. In the analysis, the Centre for Social Impact will be looking at the other surveys that are out there, because there's been heaps of really cool surveying, like of the arts sector, you know, Social Link in the Bay of Plenty. There's a whole heap of them. We've got quite a long list, but this is kind of one that goes kind of sector-wide, specifically on COVID. So yeah, so it'll include other data. It's not just targeted at registered charities, it's more targeted at the 115,000, you know, the important community groups, the voluntary run ones, etc., etc. So I guess it's just a plea really to share it with your networks when it comes out, because the more groups that fill out the survey, the more effective and stronger the results will be. And we need data to have a voice, because the community sector voice, as always, sadly, has been lacking in the media, in decision making, in government, etc., etc. So that is the objective of it, really. So that's about it. Just one more quick sentence, that is Philanthropy New Zealand has also just concluded a survey of philanthropic funders to assess both changes in the levels of philanthropic funding available and also the approaches that philanthropic funders will be taking, and that will be available in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. It's really good. Well, when it comes out, we'll make sure that we spread it within each of our respective networks, because I agree with you. One of the big things is that people love data and numbers and what's the impact. And it is quite hard to speak in a general way and say there's definitely impact. And I know anecdotally, you know, there definitely is, but if we can have some data to back it up, that would be great. So thanks very much for that update. Last up, I think Sarah Doherty, you had an update you'd like to share.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Stephen. I've just come from the Health and Disability NGO Council meeting and want to highlight a document, another one, reporting on something that's up as Māori organisation and the Salvation Army have all come together and written a white paper about, it's called Ending Community Sector Dependence on Pokie Funding. So they've said to Minister Martin and others that the opportunity really, in a way, that COVID-19 brought with the closure of gaming machines for more than 5 weeks, has been an opportunity to pause and change the system, essentially, is the call that they're putting out. So they've acknowledged not only the harmful way that the gaming trust money is gathered, but the distribution that's inequitable, and then also acknowledge the conflict that sits in there for community organisations, including health service providers who are underfunded, with thinking from government that they can go do their fundraising elsewhere and then often turn to gaming trusts. So it's practically recognising the dilemma and the conflict that sits in the sector, and wanting to draw attention to the possibility that we've got actually to really think about the system that, although many organisations do draw on that funding, there are a lot who are conflicted at the same time as doing that. And so I'll just give you one quick thing. This really stood out to me actually as a statement, that a piece of information, some data. So in 1 year through the Pokie machines in Porirua City, $13 million was gathered, and only 800,000 distributed to community organisations in Porirua. So that's just one glaring example of the inequity, and then the placement of those gaming machines in poorer communities and the social justice impact of all of that. So the white paper is raising the issues and putting forward suggestions about ways that we could call a pause and stop and look at that system again. So I don't have a whizzy link for the chat. I will send it to Stephen and he can put that into the notes from the call this week. So kia ora.
That's awesome. Stephen. Thank you very much. And I think Dean has put the link possibly in the chat if people are interested. But yeah, with these calls, the purpose is to just pull together a whole bunch of information. And so thank you everybody who's shared and given a different perspective. If you do hear of other things that people on the call would be interested, then just send me a link and we can share it more widely. On the calls, we're averaging sort of 35 people. It depends on the week, but there's about 180 people who are getting the emails. So quite often I'll get emails from people saying, I couldn't make the call, but I watched the video afterwards, or I read the discussions in the group and it was really helpful. So I think we'll just continue doing this for the foreseeable future because people seem to appreciate it as a platform to share and to hear other perspectives. And the other thing is that we have set up a Slack group. So I'm not sure if all of you have used Slack before. I know some of you are on the Slack group. There's about 40 people, maybe 42 at the moment. I don't think it's really reached its full potential yet. So if you are interested, if you're in it, if you can go and share a little bit about your background and what you're doing, that will help with getting those cross links going. But I put the links to that in various emails I'm sending out. And I see that as a real potential. There's definitely been a few people connecting on the Slack channel and able to hear what somebody else is doing and see some synergy and how they can work together. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so I'll do, again, sending out the video link as I've been doing and then a summary. And I know we're all busy. We've got different meetings to go to. I expect some of you have things you need to move on to, which is fine. Anybody who's able to stay, I'm going to send you to 4 different breakout rooms, because one of the key things here is to talk with each other. And in a big format like this, it's really hard for all of us to be able to share and express our voices. So I'm just going to have 4 rooms this week. And if one of you can report back to the group and be scribe taker and write down some bullet points of key things that you talked about or links, then that would be great. And I'll send you away. I might just do 3 rooms actually, because there's quite a few have dropped off. So but I'm looking forward to hearing back from anybody who has the time and is able to participate. That would be great. Thanks, everybody. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. And as we've been here, apparently there's a new leader of National while we've been having this meeting, so that's quite interesting. So maybe we can just run through, there were just 3 groups there. So if you could just give a brief update from each of you. I know this call has gone a bit longer than normal because we had quite a long updates at the start. But if each of you, there was actually a group of 3, a group of 4, and a group of 5. So does somebody want to give an update from one of those and we'll just move through?
We were group 1, so I can go first. We had Andrew Phillips, Tess Casey, and Ross McTaggart, and myself, Dennis Parker. And we mostly talked about the report from Ākina and appreciate that such think pieces of this are really important to have. But we talked about pros and cons of where the leadership should come from for any action from this, and pretty much agreed that the leadership needs to come from within the sector and not from Ākina. And I don't mean that as a negative aspect from Ākina, and as Tess referred to, they're not a peak body. They're not one of the organisations actually delivering services. But what we're lacking is some joint collaboration amongst ourselves as regards how we can enact some of those policies with the support of Ākina and with the support of government. And so we recognise government is the other really important part of it, but the leadership still has to fall within the sector. Other comments? Well, I'll probably leave it with there. And what we then thought was useful was that these conversations need to continue with difficult conversations with different ideas, so that we're able to sort through areas of collaboration that will actually make a difference for the future.
Great, some good thoughts there. Yeah, and I don't think Ākina would ever say that they were trying to represent the whole of the not-for-profit community sector either, because they are quite focused on business, trading, impact through that. So that's,
and we weren't trying to criticize them all. It was just like,
yeah,
thank you for that piece. It sounded like, I used to be on a government Crown Entity board. It sounded like a very good statement of intent that we've written for the government, but now it needs to be put into action from this sector.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. All right, how about the next group?
Just finding things. Okay, so I can at least attempt to report something back. We did just a little bit of the getting to know each other and talking about what we were up to with Ro's opening, and they're not really getting a chance to comment particularly. Some stuff that came up, Paul Brown, who I think has had to leave the call now, working for the CEO of the Child Fund, which was previously CCF, said that things were going okay at their end. They're lucky to have a loyal, regular giving base through donation and such. They're also feeling that they don't have a lot of clarity, like a lot of other groups, into the next 2 to 3 years. But things seem to be going well at the moment. And they're kind of looking closer to shore, having spent a fair bit of time working external to New Zealand. Now they're looking at how to cooperate and collaborate with groups in New Zealand, and kind of looking back to re-centralize that in the country, which is cool. Catherine Pete made some notes just talking about, and I don't know the acronym SID for my sins, but SID's allocation criteria, which I think was set up by Liz Mackey, previously existing, were quite excellent, and that there was some need to kind of resurrect some of those, so to speak. The work that she's been doing sees a lot of groups wanting to operate differently from contracting models, wanting to look at agreement models instead. And she talked about some previously existing agreement models that they've been working with being really quite fruitful in terms of the way that they received funding from government, and that was something to kind of be looking into there. What else do we have? Rata was in the group as well, and just kind of was saying that he's keen to continue that conversation. He's been pushing since level 4 for IRD to kind of do a little bit of thinking about how they might pivot and start considering ways of supporting customers in a way that they can kind of allow them to co-design the process with them, express their needs, and bringing them on board and thinking about that kind of in terms of like Māori economics and rangatiratanga, so those sorts of things, and has put the offer out to a number of groups, but the feedback that came back was pretty light, and that might be something to do with kind of a lack of grounding around the context, and it's maybe a little bit too big to bite off. I think that is probably kind of everything there. I don't know if anyone else missed stuff from the rest of the group there they'd like to put forward.
Catherine, did you want to say something?
Well, I could just say that the Coalition for International Development was the criteria to which I was referring, or the previous criteria that used to be established using the Coalition for International Development.
Great.
Or Council for International Development, not Coalition, Council for International Development. Sorry, beg your pardon.
It's okay. Thank you. All right, and is anybody remaining from the final group?
Yes, so tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Guillaume. With Fund of Future and Karen, Stewart and I were in the third group. Just to actually quite focus on the donation aspect, because it's been actually a recurrent theme for charities right now suffering from a drop in funding. And just reporting on some of the headways that we've made since joining the first sessions with you, Stephen. So we're talking as well specifically with Stewart around the level of donations that have been made here in New Zealand, and some data has been revalidated by Stewart. So we do know that actually people making charitable donation claim only in 40% of the cases. So that means that only 40% of people making charitable donation claim the donation tax rebates. So that means that actually 60% do not act on their past donation. So Stewart was actually kind enough to revalidate that about 300 millions were paid out in terms of donation tax rebates. So that means that there's potentially a lot more here that people could be claiming and redirecting towards either their pocket or in the likes of what Fund of Future is doing, is actually supporting charities and redirecting charitable giving rebates back towards the charities they've given to in the first place. So there's a couple of things that have been pointed out by Stewart as well around the Law Society organizing a conference around the 10th of September around specific a subject that will be discussed by Stewart on the complexity of donations law as well. So that's something that might be of interest to everyone here. We're certainly looking forward to attending that. I think one point that was actually raised during this conversation as well is, does volunteering time can be claimed back from the RD, and the answer to that was no, sadly. And then also we discuss other types of giving, which is payroll giving for organizations that are actually looking for additional funding. In the case, Karen could potentially, for example, reach out to companies that are actually surrounding a community to install payroll giving to support initiatives for the community, so that money flows back towards local charity as well. So circling back on how do you combine tax advantages to flow back donations, but also tax rebates to the community. So that's a couple of suggestions that were discussed in our group.
Great, well, thank you. That's really good. Yeah, and I think today just shows again that these calls are helpful, because we just hear such a lot of perspectives within a short time frame, and then have a chance to discuss. So I don't really have anything else that I wanted to say particularly, apart from keep up the good work that you're all doing. I know everybody in their own way is contributing and actively doing the best within their organizations, and some of you are then above all the other organizations doing work and advocacy and things. So unless anybody has anything else they want to say, I think we'll finish up, and I'll edit the video up again, and I'll probably send this one next Monday morning rather than trying to rush it out. Yeah, but thank you, everybody. See you again.